Intro. Um, Hello. Today, today we are reading the spectacular Sometimes Labels Fail by Snowdice, who has a different username on AO3, which is Adriana something. I think Adriana writes on AO3. I will have to look that up. It is a superhero standard sides AU with parental logicality. And I have read the part we're going to read together. Boomi has not read it.
No, I have not.
It is nice. It has some angst.
My favorite.
I'm not gonna spoil what the angst is. I think there's trigger warnings on the chapters though. Um, yeah. So let's get into it. Sometimes labels fail. Part one. Fandom. Sanders sides. Ships. Virgil and Logan. Virgil and Patton. Logan slash Patton. So like I think these ands are for when it's like not a romantic ship, right?
I believe so because
Yeah.
I
This
think
this
like, hey, ships are more than like friendship
yeah. You see, like this slash is
means
because they're married.
yeah, those two are together.
These ones is not a romantic ship at all. No. No.
Platonic.
Yes. Paternal. Characters. Main. Logan. Virgil. Patton. Appear. Remy. Mentioned. Roman. Emil. I guess technically Janice in like one sentence and not by name.
Poor Snake Boy.
He shows up later. I haven't gotten to the part where he shows up yet. Alright. Summary. Logan was good at labels, at categories. Logan sorted the citizens of a city into 6 different categories in his mind: heroes, villains, vigilantes, criminals, government authorities, and civilians, and knew how to deal with each. But what was he supposed to do with him? Virgil was just trying to survive, though he didn't think the part of him that compelled him to throw himself into fights whenever he saw the superhero Bluebird struggling had gotten the memo. His English teacher was right. He really was stupid. Please stop self-deprecating.
Just like, if you keep talking bad about yourself, Virgil, I will physically fight you.
Yeah.
I don't care if another person was the one who said it. You do not get to believe it.
Let's see. When the villain criminal, how should I do strikeouts? How do you read a strikeout?
I don't know.
Right. When the villain, no, criminal, no. When Shadowcaster gets injured while throwing himself into the line of fire for Logan, Logan can't find it in himself to turn him over to be arrested. Luckily, he knows a doctor very, very well. Virgil is going to get kidnapped or adopted by the end of it. Notes: Superhero AU. School shootings, guns, gunshot wound, surgery, blood. Me. Superhero AUs are fun. Let's do one of those with parental Logan and Virgil. Logicality goblin brain. I'm wiggling my eyebrows. I don't think it picks up. Me. Labels. Logan was good at labels, at categories. He kept every aspect of his life organized, from possessions to documents to his own mind. Everything had a place. Files in his office were color-coded: dark blue for work, green for personal, red, hidden in his secret compartment for his extracurriculars, and one light blue binder stuffed under the floorboards that Patton would never, ever see. His email inbox was almost always empty. Each correspondence was opened at the earliest opportunity and deleted, dealt with, or regulated to the appropriate subfolder. He kept a strict schedule: Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays for teaching and dealing with students, Tuesdays and Thursdays for research and meetings, Saturdays for Patton, and Sundays for rest. There were breakfast foods, dinner foods, snacks, and desserts, though he did on occasion make an exception for putting jams, a breakfast food, in a cookie, a dessert. Patton had had to work to convince him of such a thing. People in his life were strangers, acquaintances, or Patton. Acquaintances having the subcategories of co-workers, students, and Patton's friends and family. Everything in Logan's mind had a place. There was no room for an odds and ends drawer in his life, even if he had to practically follow Patton around the house some days to make it so. So why could Logan not figure this one out? Logan sorted the citizens of his city, of the world, in fact, into 6 different categories in his mind: heroes, villains, vigilantes, criminals, government authorities, and civilians, and knew how to deal with each. Logan himself was a hero, complete with telekinesis, public support, and a mask that hid his identity. Bludgeon, the man he had just discarded unconscious and tied on the ground, was a villain, with all of the pomp and dramatics that came with the name, even if he didn't seem to have any powers other than impressive technology and a remarkable accuracy with guns. Guns. The woman who was rostering to collect the villain and the others buzzing around the scene were government authorities, namely police officers. The couple of teenagers that were currently being thwarted from taking advantage of the chaos to steal a television by said police officers were criminals, separated from villains as they had no long-term goals for societal upheaval or dramatics. They were simply opportunists. The young woman who bashed in knees and dumped gang members at the police station on Saturday nights was a vigilante, separated from criminals and villains by her intentions, and separated from heroes by her means. The old man who'd shot Logan that once was also a vigilante, despite Logan's distaste for him. The new egotistical young man with super strength and a prince costume who started showing up to aid Logan was a blundering idiot, or hero.
Oh, so many guesses as to who that could be.
Yeah, I'll get. Any guesses?
Could it possibly be Roman?
Well, I cannot confirm nor deny if that is Roman, the Prince of Drama.
It just sounds right to me.
I mean,
Yep.
yeah, it's Roman. The chief of police who'd gotten kidnapped last week and was still recovering in the hospital was a government official. Patton said he was doing well, though he'd only seen him once after the surgery. Patton himself was a civilian, though no less important or skilled in Logan's eyes. The child who'd been told to run on strangled breath less than 2 minutes ago was a civilian, too. It was easy for Logan to take one look at people and put them into boxes, but what on earth was he supposed to do with the figure bleeding out before him now? Shadowcaster. When the man had first become known to the public, cloaked in shadows and silent in the night, he'd been branded as a criminal, and an effective one as that. At that. His activities often aligned with this classification, robbing banks, stores, and once a museum. As more of his crimes came to light, the media had started hedging towards calling him a villain, especially with his powers. Then he and the idiot prince had gotten into a pissing match, a fight, which had ended in the destruction of some public property, which was honestly more of the hero's fault in Logan's opinion, but the media had leaned into it despite the lack of deaths or injury by Shadowcaster's hand. To the contrary, there had been a rumor that he'd saved a couple from a crashed car once on his way back from robbing a bank, though that could have just been someone with a similar disguise. Logan had honestly not paid him much mind. Whether a criminal or a low-level villain, he had been far too harmless to concern Logan. He'd had only a one-page report in Logan's red files detailing his existence for quite some time. Then the incident happened. An active shooter in a local high school. He'd killed every administrator in the front office before they could even send out an alert. The calls had started coming into 911 from panicked students' cell phones as the shooter worked his way meticulously through the school, spreading carnage and taking hostages. That is the first time Logan had ever come face to face with the Shadowcaster. They hadn't questioned it, hadn't paused. Logan had been wrapped up in shadows, cool and not quite solid against his skin, hiding him from view and muffling his footsteps. Logan didn't think he'd have been able to sneak up on the shooter without them. Didn't know how many more bullets would have flown, how many more would be dead, how many more children would be dead. Even with the advantage, the shooter had managed to get off a few shots in the struggle, but he'd been blinded by shadows and only managed to graze 3 of the hostages. After that incident, the public opinion of the Shadowcaster shifted bit by bit. He didn't stop committing crimes. In fact, he didn't really change his behavior at all. But reporters started looking harder. A few people saved here, a violent criminal stopped there. He helped Logan take down a villain a few times by clearing the area of civilians so Logan wasn't distracted. He'd once talked down a boy whose powers had gone haywire when Logan couldn't get there in time. Vigilante? The people questioned, but that was wrong too. His crimes were selfish, not aimed to help the greater good. Yet villain? Even criminal? Those tasted like ash in Logan's mouth. But what else was he? He was not a civilian, certainly, and he was definitely not sanctioned by the government. The only thing left was hero, yet he was not that either. He was not a beacon of good in a mask. He did not go out of his way to help people or patrol. The acts of benevolence were performed on the way to or from his crimes. He acted when he stumbled upon dire circumstances, but that was not the goal. He was not a hero, but the people knew when the worst came to worst, when there were villains who aimed to destroy and maim, or natural disasters that threatened to level the city, they could hide behind him and be protected. Logan knew when worst came to worst, when his shadows could barely solidify enough to stop one bullet, but there were 2 bullets in the air, when it seemed he had to choose one or the other, in a split second, his shadows would come up to protect Logan from harm, and his body would dive to protect the child. So, what was Logan supposed to do with him? In the time it had taken Logan to disarm the villain, Shadowcaster had managed to drag himself away, but he hadn't gotten too far. Logan had easily found him. He'd left a trail of blood all the way to the small alleyway. "Don't!" he spat when he noticed Logan. His hands were covered in blood, one against the wound, and one on the ground supporting his weight. "Don't!" he repeated when Logan moved forward, but there was a shake to it this time. He curled himself around the wound the best he could without hurting himself further, and Logan irrationally found himself wondering if he'd always been that small. "Don't, please, I'm already hurt." Well, that was distressing. He crouched down to touch him gently on the shoulder. "It's just me." He flinched back at the touch. "Please don't," he rasped, and Logan couldn't see much of his face with the mask in the way, but he could see his eyes, wet with tears and filled with pain and fear. "Please, I helped you. Please." "And I'm going to help you," Logan assured him, trying to ignore the uncomfortable, squirming sensation in his stomach, before using his powers to maneuver the man into his arms. He wasn't very heavy, shockingly light, in fact, but he shook violently in Logan's grip. Was it fear, or was he cold due to blood loss? There was a lot of blood, Logan noted, and his fingers were cold when they came up to push weakly at his face. He had to use his powers to still his struggling, afraid he'd accidentally drop him when he flew otherwise. It was difficult, but eventually he stopped trying to throw himself out of Logan's arms to the ground below. Not because he'd calmed, though. No, he'd lost consciousness. The clear course of action was to take him to the hospital. But Logan knew if he did that, the man would be arrested as soon as anyone caught wind of it, and they would catch wind of it. That didn't seem right under the circumstances. So, he took him to the only other place he could think to. By the time Logan made it home, Patton was already rushing around, gathering supplies with a mask on his face, because he wasn't stupid. "I saw on the news. Put him on the guest bed." Logan wondered how he'd known he was flying off to bring the man here instead of a hospital, as he realistically should have, but he didn't ask. Patton probably had known Logan would end up here before Logan had known it himself. Patton followed him up the stairs with armfuls of packaged bandages. The door to the guest room was already propped open, and medical supplies were set out on a steel table that had been rolled into the room. The bed, usually covered with soft, patterned sheets and a thick homemade quilt, was now only covered in a white fitted sheet. There was a box of latex gloves set out on the nightstand, and an organized collection of scalpels, clamps, still packaged needles, and vials of medicine laid out in reach. The room already smelled of disinfectant. He'd prepped for surgery. As Logan set the bleeding man on the bed, he thought that he was likely right to do so. Patton was elbowing him out of the way the moment his hands were out from under Shadowcaster, gloves on his hands already. Patton didn't hesitate to take scissors to the bloody fabric of the man's outfit near the wound. Something flickered across his face when he saw the man's stomach, a bit of Patton slipping past the Dr. Patton countenance, but he determinedly shook it off. "I'm definitely going to have to operate," he said, sounding unsurprised. He stripped the bloody gloves off and threw them away in a trash can he'd set up next to the steel table. "Set up an IV, get the heart monitor going, and get the scope ready." He walked into the bathroom, and Logan heard water running. Logan jumped to do as he asked, snapping on gloves himself before moving to insert the IV. Shadowcaster, unfortunately, woke a few moments after Logan stepped back from hooking up the heart monitor. His eyes flickered, and he gave a confused, pained sound. He tried to move, to sit, and Logan quickly pinned him down with his powers. The heart monitor beeped faster, and Logan could feel him try to push back against his powers, not nearly strong enough to get anywhere. "No," he said weakly, and tried to thrash. Shadows started to shudder and crawl at the edges of the room. "Give him the morphine," Patton ordered, lips pressed into a grim line. He was wearing surgical gloves now that went all the way up past his elbows. The man on the bed was out of it, but he understood enough to struggle even harder at those words. Shadows lashed at Logan's ankles, drawing blood. He hissed and batted them away with his powers. He grabbed the morphine and probed at the still struggling figure with his powers to get an estimate of his weight. Very light for a full-grown man, he noted, before measuring an appropriate dose of medication and inserting it into the IV. His struggles weakened and then stopped. There was a moment's pause. "Lights," Patton demanded, and Logan flicked his fingers so all of the lights in the room were at full power. "All right, let's go." The surgery took a little over an hour. Patton had sent him to go take a shower when he'd finished, and Logan had agreed, wanting to get the blood off of himself. This particular supersuit would be going into the fire. He heard the guest bedroom shower going when he walked by and down the steps to the kitchen. The oven had been turned off, and there was a partially cooked pan of lasagna cold on the rack. Logan went to the fridge and grabbed tubs of leftovers. Fridays were usually leftover nights, and today was Wednesday. They'd have to figure out something else for that meal. There was a small whine from the corner of the room, and Logan looked over at the dog kennel in the corner. "When Patton gets down, Missy," he told her softly. She whined again. Logan took what he wanted from the Tupperware and popped the plate into the microwave. While waiting for it to warm, he dished out a few more leftovers onto another plate. He put on an extra enchilada and none of the meatloaf. Then he filled the kettle with water and set it to boil before putting away the other leftovers. Logan heard footsteps on the stairs, and Missy let out a plaintive woof. "Telling on me for not letting you out immediately?" he asked. Patton chuckled as he entered the room. "Is Daddy being mean to you again and not letting you go jump on our guest's bed?" he cooed, walking over to unlock the kennel. Assumedly, that meant the guest room door was now shut. "I am not that thing's daddy," Logan groused. Patton picked the mutt up and gave it a kiss on the head. "You love her," he claimed. "I do not," Logan insisted. "Do too." He set the dog down, and it trotted away directly towards the steps, probably to go sniff at the guest bedroom door. "I tolerate its presence and feed it, that is all," Logan informed him. Patton hummed and walked over to lean against the counter next to him as he swapped out the plates in the microwave. "What about me?" he asked, and stole a green bean from Logan's plate. "Do you tolerate my presence and feed me too?" To be fair, you feed me a majority of the time, at least 75% of my meals any given week, Logan told him, watching the thief's movements. Ah, so you're the dog then. He popped the green bean in his mouth and immediately spit it out because it was too hot.
Oh my god, this is so cute! I'm gonna die.
Yeah. Very cute. You
Okay.
prepared for 5 more chapters of them being adorable.
No, no, I am not. But I'm saying,
Logan smirked. That is what you get. Patton glowered at him, and then shuffled forward to bump his forehead against Logan's shoulder. Logan raised his arm to allow him to cuddle into his side and wrap his arms around his waist. He clung hard for a few moments before his shoulders relaxed. Then he tilted his face up expectantly. Logan raised an eyebrow. Sure you don't want to kiss the dog again first? He asked. Patton pouted at him, and how was he supposed to resist that? He leaned forward to kiss him, turning slightly and letting his hand trail up his spine to the back of his neck. Logan pulled back when the microwave beeped, and Patton made an unhappy sound. Food, Logan said. Patton sighed and drew back to grab his plate from the microwave and pick Logan's up from the counter. The kettle had turned off once the water boiled, and Logan poured hot water over tea bags in 2 cups. He sat one down in front of Patton and took the other to where his plate already sat. The dog came back into the kitchen while they ate, giving up on the guest bedroom door for now, and settled next to Logan's feet. He poked her with his socked foot, and she rolled over onto her back happily, so Logan could idly pet her stomach with his toes. I see that happy expression on your face.
because I immediately went, God damn it, that's basically what I do with my dog sometimes.
Nice. Patton finished first, twirling his fork between his fingers while he waited for Logan to finish, clearly with something on his mind. Logan set his fork down and tilted his head with a raised eyebrow. He's been tortured before, Patton told him, his voice clinical. Logan blinked. What? Patton's fork continued to twirl, and his voice stayed steady, as though he were giving a report. When I cut off his shirt, there was a lot of blood, but I could see scars too. Some cuts and burns, all too carefully placed to be an accident or from a life of fighting. I snuck a peek once you'd left, and I cleaned away most of the blood. They go all the way up and all the way down, carved rather strategically based on nerve endings. That would explain a few of his mannerisms when I picked him up earlier. He likely fears being in such a vulnerable state if that has happened. Patton nodded. He's not going to wake happy, Patton said. At least one of us will have to be in the room as the drugs wear off. He'll certainly panic otherwise and overreact, likely exacerbating his injuries. He'd probably panic anyway, Logan thought, and panic was if they were lucky. There was every likelihood he'd not only not wake happy, but wake homicidal. He sighed. It's a good thing I don't have to teach tomorrow and that you are not on call. The fork twirled and twirled between Patton's fingers. Are you going to cry? Logan asked. Patton nodded, and Logan got to his feet. He kneeled next to his chair and grabbed the fork from his hand to set it down on the table. Patton hiccuped and started to cry. Logan pulled him gently to his chest and let him. By nature, he was very bad at this, but practice had made him better. He rubbed his back with gentle circles and pressed his cheek on the top of his head. Eventually, Missy noticed and trotted over with a whine to scratch at Patton's legs. Hey, Missy girl, Patton said, sniffling. He reached down to pat her on the head. Logan picked Patton up from the chair, using his powers to make it a bit easier. He carried him to the couch before letting go of him in midair. He yelped on instinct. Stop doing that, he complained, squirming while suspended in the air. Logan laid himself down on the couch. That's not what you were saying last night, he reminded mildly, and flicked a hand. So Patton rolled over in midair and then settled on Logan's chest. Patton rolled his eyes. His face was still puffy, but he'd ceased crying for the moment. He leaned his ear against Logan's chest. Maybe he was a superhero once, Patton suggested. And then someone did that, and he broke and decided being good didn't matter. That would explain why he does bad things, but still helps people, because he's actually a good person. He's just confused. Patton had always been sympathetic to Shadowcaster, especially after the school shooting. Even when Logan had still been hesitant, Patton had made up his mind on the matter. He'd had to do surgery on some of the kids that day, and if anything got to Patton, it was kids. Maybe, Logan agreed. He hadn't heard of a hero with shadow powers before he'd shown up. In fact, Logan had never heard of a super with such powers before him. Though it was possible he'd been a newbie below Logan's radar who'd gotten caught up in more than he could handle too fast. Certainly sounded like a villain origin story. Maybe we could help him, Patton said, biting his lips. Remy's boyfriend is a therapist. Remy was a nurse that worked for Patton, who lived mostly on coffee. Logan hesitated. Maybe, he said softly. Patton was an optimist. Logan was not. I don't know if he'd accept something like that. I haven't really gotten a chance to talk to him. Well then, you don't know that he wouldn't accept it. That's true, Logan said. He brushed Patton's hair away from his face. I don't know. Well, I'll just have to apply love and affection, he chirped, propping himself on Logan's chest. Patton, he's an adult man, Logan pointed out. So are you, and it works on you. Does not, Logan claimed. That's not what you were saying last night, he said, sticking out his tongue. Then he leaned forward to peck him on the lips. We should probably go clean up the kitchen and get our masks back on.
Oh my god. Okay, these two. Make up your minds. Do you want me to laugh? Do you want me to cry? Do you want me to just go, oh my god.
All the feelings.
I actually did cry a little bit when Patton was crying. That's why I had to rub my eyes.
Oh, sympathy.
Oh,
Ready for chapter 2?
Yes, my turn. Sentence labeled Phil, part 2. Virgil. I have very high standards. Anyone? Dude, want this leftover slice of pizza? Virgil. Oh no, you're meeting all of my standards! I reference. Oh gosh.
As you can see, this chapter is from Virgil's perspective.
But oh my gosh. Yes.
Yes.
Virgil
Angsty boy.
Yes, angsty boy. All right. Virgil woke in pain, which was not particularly unusual. What was slightly more unusual, but not nearly as unusual as he wished, and a lot more terrifying, was that he felt drugged up. Not good. He tried to remember what had happened to him, casting his mind back through his day. He'd been hungry, he recalled. He hadn't managed to find breakfast, and only vitamin water had been in the budget for lunch. The need for food finally won out against the need for caution once more, and he'd gone out with the mask, hoping for score, and then... Oh, right, he'd gotten distracted. Stupid bludgeon. Bludgeon?
Yeah, bludgeon. It's a verb, but this guy's using it as his name.
Okay, that's what threw me, because I'm like, wait a second. Huh?
Yeah.
Stupid bludgeon had attacked the city, and, well, Virgil really should have just ignored it. He'd seen Bluebird, and he'd looked like he was kind of on his back foot, and there'd been a bunch of civilians around, since, of course, Bludgeon attacked a busy park because he was an asshole. So, like an idiot, he dived headfirst into the conflict. What was his problem? He knew what his problem was. He'd gotten attached. Stupid. Bluebird bought him a sandwich once, and he followed him around like a stray dog. It wasn't like he would have done it if he'd known Virgil was Shadowcaster. He'd just taken pity on some poor homeless-looking kid. He was a nice guy, or at least he had to maintain a public image of being a nice guy, it didn't mean anything. Oh gosh. I just realized, so this means that Bluebird knows him as both kid and the freaking villain. And the mask probably still hasn't come off yet. So they still don't know who this person is. Oh, Virgil, I love you, but holy shit. Okay, try. I'm trying to get myself composed again. I'm just like, oh, I'm already thinking as to what could happen when that mask comes off.
Things.
Yes. Try to tell that to whatever stupid, suicidal instinct activated in Virgil's mind anytime they were in a fight together. So, yeah, he'd gotten involved. He'd been content to let Bluebird throw the punches while he tried to get the civilians out of there the best he could. That way Bluebird didn't have to be distracted worrying about them. Then everything had gone a bit blurry. A flash of silver, guns. Virgil didn't like guns. Not after he stepped over his own classmates' bodies. Not when gunshots haunted his dreams even now. Not when he looked at the tile floor by his locker and still saw splattered red even if it had been cleaned away months ago. Oh, that's right. He'd been shot. It had just been a haze of pain and fear after that. He thinks he said something to the kid he'd taken a bullet for, and then he tried to limp off, but the bullet wound had been actually really bad and he hadn't gotten far. Bluebird had come after him, and sure, Virgil had just saved the man's life, but he knew the superhero couldn't exactly look down fondly on him. He was a villain after all. Oh god, was he in a prison cell? Oh god, was he not in a prison cell? Things happen to capture villains. Bad things. Things that surpass what he'd be getting if he made it home after this. Imagine he'd want to be back home, Virgil thought ruefully. He felt his heart rate speed up, and then he heard his heart rate pick up. Oh, fuck. Heart monitor. Are you awake? A voice he didn't recognize asked. Virgil went still, which was stupid because if he'd actually been asleep, he wouldn't have reacted at all. Do you want some water? The voice asked. We have you set up with fluids in your IV, but I imagine your throat's dry. The voice sounded nice. Maybe he was just in the hospital? It certainly smelled like disinfectant enough to be one. He peeked open his eyes, and nope, not a hospital and not a jail cell either. A room, plain and simple, but definitely in someone's house. This was disaster scenario. They wanted something, or else they would have taken him to the police or a hospital. They didn't want him in a system. They didn't want wolves to regulate what they could do. His breathing hitched. He looked over at the person who spoke. He was wearing a mask, but not one that Virgil recognized on the hero or villain scene. It was a simple black thing that hid the top part of his face, revealing only his bright green eyes and the curve of his lips. Here, he said, offering a bottle of water. Virgil eyed it suspiciously. There was a moment of silence, and Virgil wondered if he had mind-reading powers, because he said, You're already hooked up to an IV. I wouldn't need to put anything in the water. Right. Virgil reached out to take the bottle with slightly shaky fingers and took a sip. Do you remember what happened? The man asked. Virgil nodded. Got shot, he said, handing back the water bottle. Bluebird found me. I'm guessing he flew me here. Yep, the man confirmed. I had to perform surgery to get the bullet out and stop some internal bleeding. Fuck, Virgil responded shakily. The man glanced at the heart monitor as it picked up again. That thing sucked. Well, Virgil, how else are they supposed to make sure you're okay?
Yeah, but it's telling on him with his moods. It's a tattletale.
Virgil's just like, shut the fuck up.
Yes.
It went well, he assured. You shouldn't have any issues. Well, that at least sounded like the man expected Virgil to live for more than a few days, so that was comforting. Sort of. Do you mind if I check the wound? He asked. Sure, he said, because he wasn't sure if he even had a choice to refuse. The man flashed him a quick smile before grabbing gloves and moving to undo the bandages with precise fingers, careful to block the wound with his hand so Virgil couldn't see. Can I see it? he asked. The man glanced up at him briefly before his eyes cut to a spot on his chest, and that Virgil knew well, and oh, of course he'd seen all of that. Apparently, judging that he'd seen enough to not be squeamish, or at least to know not to look if he was, he peeled back the bandages completely so Virgil could tilt his head to see it. Wow, that's really good, he said, impressed. He didn't think he'd ever been sewn up that nicely before, even that one time he'd gotten to see a real doctor in the ER. Well, I'd hope so, considering all that money I spent on medical school, he said with a chuckle, starting to rebandage the wound. You're a real doctor? Virgil asked. He raised an eyebrow. Well, Bluebird didn't just take you to some random person on the street and tell them to perform surgery on you. Oh my god, yes! It's like, well, of course he wouldn't take you to just some random ass person. He took you to someone qualified.
Yes.
That's cool, Virgil said, being a doctor. Do you like it? Something shifted in the man's face, and Virgil tensed, but he didn't seem angry about the question. I do, he said. I like helping people. He snapped off the gloves and threw them into a trash can before walking into the side room. Virgil followed him with his eyes as he washed his hand in the small bathroom sink. There's a package of crackers next to you on the nightstand. Try eating if you're up to it. Virgil looked over. It didn't look particularly appetizing at the moment, even though he hadn't eaten in the last 24 hours. He picked it up anyway. His fingers were shaking and slimy from sweat, so he wasn't able to get a good enough grip on the plastic wrap to his frustration. The doctor came back over and Virgil froze, but he just took it from him and quietly. You cannot quietly open plastic. Just crinkle, crinkle, crinkle. Just took it from him and quickly tore it open with ease before handing it back. Virgil looked at him for a moment before taking one of the crackers and starting to nibble at it. Nibble, 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 do, 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 do. Nibble, nibble, nibble. I'll get you something more later if that goes down okay. I started some soup a few hours ago. Virgil nodded and continued to nibble until one of the crackers was gone. He set the other one back on the nightstand for now. The doctor watched him with seemingly kind eyes, and he found himself relaxing slightly despite himself, if only for the moment. He went to push his hair out of his face, and his fingers hit fabric. You left my mask on, he said, dumbstruck. I'm a doctor. I follow the masking courtesy, he said. Yes, but that courtesy was for heroes, which Virgil was not. But Again, Virgil thought he must be a mind reader, because he answered the question Virgil couldn't get out. You saved Bluebird and a civilian's life at the risk of your own. That's more than enough for me to leave your mask on. That was... Wow. Why do you think Bluebird brought you here instead of the hospital? He didn't want you to be arrested because you helped him. Oh? He wasn't sure if he'd believe that, but wouldn't that be nice? For this to just be a kind thing. If anyone could be kind, it would be Bluebird. Of course, if he did just let him walk after this all would probably be a useless adventure, because, after that, Virgil wouldn't be able to stop himself from diving in front of another bullet for the man at the first opportunity. The man was watching him with an intense eyes, like he could read every one of Virgil's thoughts on his face. Was he a mind reader? Are you a mind reader? He did not answer. Where is Bluebird? Virgil asked. The doctor's lips twitched in amusement. He's right there, he motioned to the floor with his head, and Virgil looked down to see a person who was clearly Bluebird. He just passed out on the floor. Just like, was he in there the whole time, just making sure he was okay?
I think so.
My God. Okay, 1 second. Just gotta grab my pillow. Oh, are you adorable? I just screamed into the bear pillow, but I don't think it helped.
No, I could hear you.
Oh my God. I was not expecting that of Logan. Okay, 1 second. Let me drink.
Hey.
Okay, let's see if I can actually get through this now. I was not expecting him to just be passed out on the floor.
Into the second line.
I might just read this whole paragraph over because of how much I've been losing it.
Fair.
Okay. Keep it together. God damn it. Okay. Boomy. Boomy. Keep it together. Put your shit in the box. Get it together. Okay. Okay. Come on. You can do this in semi-seriousness. Oh my god. I just wasn't expecting Logan to be passed out on the floor.
Yes.
Just flop. Okay. The doctor's lips. God damn it. Because I'm just like, the Logan from Snowdice is so composed. And so you wouldn't expect him to just pass out on the floor. That's what's getting me as I'm visualizing Logan just flop.
You know, he has been lying on the floor in canon at least once.
Yes, but that was one. And that was because he was given a jar of crofters that was specifically made for him.
Yes, and he fainted out of delight.
Okay. Do this. I can do this. I can fucking do it. No. All right. Ah! That. Okay. God damn it. I'm just gonna be a giggly bitch. All right, I'm just gonna go for it.
Hey.
The doctor's lips twitched in amusement. He's right there. He motioned to the floor with his head, and Virgil looked down to see a person who was clearly Bluebird. Yet at the same time, the man's current state threw him for a loop. He was wearing the mask. Oh God. No, it's got
Yeah, I was looking forward to you getting to this next part.
It got worse. Fuck. Okay. No, I don't want to do this again.
You don't have to start over.
All right, I'll just start from the sentence this time. He was wearing the mask still, but instead of his normal superhero costume, he was wearing pajama pants and a long-sleeved t-shirt. He was sprawled flat on his back on the floor asleep. He's not as used to being up for such long amounts of time, the poor thing, the doctor chuckled. He walked over to him. Wakey, wakey, he said, and prodded him in the side with his toes. This is bizarre, Virgil thought as the hero startled awake. What's it, huh? He squinted sleepily up at the doctor. Why? He croaked, confused. To sway his lingering fear about the situation, Virgil felt the urge to laugh. Oh, like I've been for like the past 5 minutes. You brought a guest home last night, remember? The doctor asked. Bluebird didn't look any less confused. He's awake now. He blinked slowly, and Virgil thought of the lights in his earth science classroom. Mr. Foiler was a pretty apathetic teacher who played movies at least once a week. When they were over, he'd flick the light switches from left to right. First, black ones lit up, then the ones by the board, then the middle ones, then the front row until everything was on and the classroom was bright. That's what happened to Bluebird's face in a few moments. Right, Bluebird said, all business as he sat up to turn intense eyes on Virgil. Hello. Virgil fisted the sheets in his hand. Hi. He stood, and despite the pajamas and mismatched... God damn it. Okay. He passed out on the floor. He's in his pajamas with the superhero mask, and now his socks are mismatched.
Yes.
Yeah. But I don't even know why that one's funny to me. Life's too short to wear matching socks.
It's because Logan is so organized, and yet his socks don't match.
Wolves are pretty organized too, and their socks never fucking match. I don't know why this took me off guard.
Well,
It's Logan.
It is Logan. It is Logan, and he would prefer his socks to match, but unfortunately, his husband and his dog have ensured that they do not.
All right. Okay. He stood, and despite the pajamas and mismatched patterned socks, he still managed to cut an imposing figure, especially when Virgil was laying trapped on the bed, unsure if he could even stand with the pain in his abdomen, or if he'd even be steady with the drug still slugging through his veins. He didn't think he had the strength to make shadows, let alone make them solid enough to put forth any type of defense. Bluebird, on the other hand, could toss him like a rag doll with barely a thought. "How are you feeling?" he asked. Bad," Virgil admitted, as he had recently gotten shot. "But I've been worse." "I see." And Virgil really wished he could see the man's face at that moment because his flat tone gave away very little. He sounded maybe a bit angry. The doctor had said he'd brought him here and gotten him stitched up. And thanks for the whole not letting him get shot thing, but did the doctor even really know him? Maybe he lied to the man to get him to do what he wanted. Maybe he had intended to be nice, but then Virgil pissed him off and now that was out the window. Sure, he'd been unconscious the whole time, but Virgil really sucked, so he wouldn't put it past himself. "Virgil! I will physically fight you! Not right now because you're recovering, but I will physically fight you!" Virgil, I want to physically fight him and hug him and make sure he recovers. All at once. Oh, I'm gonna have fun with that line.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Oh my god!
That. Hang on.
I'm gonna have fun with that line.
Yeah, hang on. Let me real quick see if
Oh,
I
I'm
can.
gonna have fun. I'm gonna have fun with the entirety of that paragraph. I saw several other instances, but oh my god, Virgil.
We'll switch over to AO3, and you can see the whole thing.
Okay. All right, that's gonna be the equivalent of me going supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
In
But at
fact,
least I know all of that word beforehand. I'm just gonna walk into that like, oh shit, here we go. A hand gripped his wrist, making him jerk his head up to see the doctor's concerned eyes. "Right, stupid heart monitor. So, am I your prisoner now?" he blurted. "Because if you want information, I don't really have any about anyone but me. And if you want information about me, you can just take off my mask and do a Google search or two, but I've never talked to other villains or anything, so I wouldn't know anything about them. Well, I did talk to the salamander once, but he's already in prison, so I don't think you'd need that information on him. And it wasn't even like a real conversation, you know? I was stealing from an ATM and he was like, 'Do you want to work for me?' And I punched him in the face because he was a creep, so I really don't know his secret identity or anyone's secret identity except for mine. But like I said, you..." "Hey." A hand touched his shoulder and he snapped his mouth closed with a flinch. "You need to breathe," the doctor said. His eyes were kind, and after the initial knee-jerk reaction, Virgil realized the touch was pretty nice, gentle but firm, grounding. "Can you breathe for me?" Virgil sucked in a breath. "There you go," the doctor said, and the hand on his shoulder patted him a couple times. Virgil dared to glance at Bluebird. From what he could see of his face, he seemed completely lost, like Virgil in math class. He didn't look like he was mad enough to punch Virgil in the face, at the very least, despite the doubtlessly incomprehensible ramble he just spouted. "Yes, and thanks to you, I also had to do that."
yes.
Virgil saw the doctor move his head in a sharp motion out of the corner of his eyes. Bluebird's eyes flashed him for a moment and then back to Virgil. "You are not a prisoner," he said. "Though for medical reasons, I suggest you not leave yet. However, once you have healed enough, you are free to go." He seemed to be telling the truth. It would make sense that he was telling the truth with all Virgil knew about him. He was a pretty stand-up guy. He was Bluebird, the quintessential superhero, well trusted by the public since before Virgil was even born. He was a beacon of kindness, a symbol. He was a good guy. But, like, so were a lot of adults. It didn't usually work out well for Virgil. He bought Virgil that sandwich, though. "You are not a stray dog." "Yeah, but food, though." "Okay," he replied softly. Oh no. "Okay," Bluebird questioned, and yeah, there was definitely confusion. The doctor coughed. Bluebird said, "Okay," and shot him 2 thumbs up. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Virgil snorted out a surprised laugh and then ducked his head to try to hide his face with his. Virgil, honey, you're still wearing the mask. What are you doing? You don't have to leave. Literally, don't have to hide.
Yes.
Virgil snorted out a surprised laugh and then ducked his head, trying to hide his face with his hair in embarrassment, despite the fact that he was still wearing a mask. Bluebird was a dork. Who would have known? Yes, he is always like that, the doctor offered, giving him one last tap on the shoulder before drawing away. Like what? Bluebird asked. Adorable, the doctor responded, reaching up to pinch his cheek playfully as he walked towards the door. Bluebird batted at him, but he was already gone. I'm going to go check on the soup, he called from the hallway. Bluebird turned to Virgil, looking, well, not as nervous as Virgil himself was, but he was a close second. Do you have any needs I can provide for? He asked. Or perhaps questions I could answer. This is my house, if you would like to know. Oh. Just the fact that he's like, okay, I don't know if you're a villain, I don't know if you're a vigilante. You saved my life. So yeah, when you leave, yes, this is my house.
Yeah. He might be planning to be okay, I'm gonna spin you around a few times so you're dizzy and you don't know how to find my house again. But
Yeah, but at the same time, I don't see Logan going to that extreme.
yeah, he trusts this guy enough to be like, this is my house. This is where I
Yeah,
live.
especially since also Virgil has literally never hurt him or given him any reason to think he would be a danger to him. So just like, yeah, this is my house.
Mm-hmm.
Virgil bit his lip. Is that what you were saying? Is that real, or was it just for the doctor's benefit? Because he seems like he can't really stomach stuff and you don't want to upset him. If you're asking me if I plan to torture you for information you don't have, or information you do have for that matter, then the answer is no, he said, his awkwardness gone and replaced with that firm intensity Virgil was used to seeing, both on the news and in person. Okay, Virgil said again. Cool, thanks. Oh, the way that he's talking, he's definitely giving away the fact he's a teenager. Like, all right, cool.
Yeah.
Okay, cool, thanks, Bluebird echoed, seeming to chew on the words. Virgil shrugged at him, which seemed to confuse him even more. They were silent for a while. So, the man said with a cough, you like to rob banks. Virgil stared at him for a moment. It didn't look accusing or anything, after all. It was no secret that Virgil was a thief. It wasn't even posed as a question. I, wouldn't say I like it. I'm good at it, but it's not really what I want to do with my life. Ah, he said. I like space. Oh my god, are you trying to discuss interests with me? He bristled. That is what acquaintances do, is it not? Wow. Virgil leaned back down to stare at the ceiling. I would take another bullet for you. Just straight up, I would take another bullet for you.
Uh-huh.
That will not be necessary, Bluebird was quick to say. Especially after I just sewed you up so nicely, the doctor interjected with a stern voice from the hallway. Virgil tilted his head to see him. He held a tray, and when he got closer, Virgil could smell chicken broth, which wasn't usually on his top 10 list of smells, but today it smelled amazing. He hadn't been hungry up until that moment, but suddenly his stomach jerked awake with a vengeance. He moved to sit up and went a bit too fast, letting out a pinned whine. Slowly, the doctor reminded with a frown. Sorry, Virgil said quickly. The doctor's face gentled. Here, let me help. He set the tray down on the nightstand and then helped prop Virgil up with some pillows. Thanks. Oh my god, we're getting back into cuteness.
Mm-hmm.
I say as if I did not spend 5 minutes squealing at the fact that Logan. Okay. The doctor smiled in response and then picked up the tray again before setting it onto his lap. Now, eat up. We want to make sure everything's working okay after surgery. Virgil nodded and reached for the spoon, eyes watching the other occupants of the room carefully, not wanting to upset them, especially since they were offering food. The doctor actually seemed pleased that he was eating. Here, have some bread and some butter too, he said, and his hand came forward to grab the knife Virgil hadn't noticed. Virgil jerked back violently, and the tray went flying, but instead of Virgil's legs being scalded by hot soup, the tray and all of its contents froze in midair. Sorry, Virgil choked out, tears building up in his eyes. Sorry, I'm sorry. No, I should have, the doctor stuttered. I'm going to take this downstairs. He grabbed the knife out of the air and rushed off of the room. Sorry. It isn't a problem, Bluebird said calmly. The tray flipped back upright slowly, probably so he wouldn't freak out again and fuck up something else. Virgil watched the objects move through the air. You have a lot of control, Virgil said, amazed. It was one thing to toss stuff around, but it was a totally different thing to have enough precision to stop a liquid in midair. I've had a lot of practice, Bluebird replied easily. Virgil's eyes flickered to him and then to the beads of floating liquid. Can I touch it? He asked. If you'd like. Virgil reached out a finger and poked the nearest bubble of chicken broth. It gave slightly at its touch, like it was encased in a clear balloon. Weird. Whoa, that's awesome. The tray settled back on his lap, the bowl and non-knife silverware taking their places on top of it, but the liquid remained in midair for a moment. A few bubbles of liquid started to move, floating through the air lazily. Man, that has to take a lot of practice, Virgil said. You can blame your doctor for that, Bluebird said. He makes me throw popcorn and soda into his mouth from across the room. The edges of his mouth quirked up. Also, he's rather clumsy. This is not the first tray of food I've saved in my time. Virgil puffed out a laugh. It's really cool, though. I don't think many people with telekinesis can do this, right? No, it just takes more practice than most people are willing to put in. Most are content with just building strength, not dexterity. He tilted his head at Virgil. What about your power, if I may ask? I've never heard of someone having the power to manipulate shadows before you. Oh, I just have light manipulation powers, nothing that special. I can do the normal things too, but I learned to use it in the dark, so I'm more practiced at that. It's light manipulation? He asked. Yeah, it's less me making shadows and more me shoving away light, I think. He made a small shadow appear between his fingers and held it up for him to see. I think it must take some of the heat with the light because they're usually kind of cold. He had it wind around his fingers like it was a small snake. Fascinating, Bluebird breathed. And how do you make them semi-solid? Not sure, really, he said. I think maybe I'm forcing enough energy into the edges to make it work. Bluebird said. One of the floating bubbles of soup caught Virgil's attention as it floated by his mouth. Oh, please do what I think you're gonna do. He leaned forward slightly to snap his mouth around it.
Was that what you were thinking?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Bluebird chuckled as the bubble popped in Virgil's mouth. Still hungry? He asked. I only got like 2 spoonfuls, Virgil responded. Well, then perhaps it is time to stop playing with your food. The hovering soup floated down towards the bowl and settled there. Lame, Virgil grumbled. Eat the damn soup, he laughed. Language! The doctor gasped playfully, walking into the room. He turned his concerned eyes on Virgil. You doing all right? He asked. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to. I just kind of panicked. You don't need to apologize, the doctor said. No harm done. He reached slowly over to give him a hair ruffle with the gentlest touch imaginable. Virgil smiled at him and ate his soup. Oh my god. But yeah, just like, oh, please let him do it.
Yes. Cute.
Oh my god. Logan's probably confused as fuck. He's just like, I thought this was another adult, but they're acting a lot younger now that I'm actually interacting with them.
Well, Patton also noms things in midair.
Yeah, but no, I'm just talking. No, yeah, but no, I'm also just talking about how like his mannerisms and his speech patterns because Virgil isn't as put together as Logan is, and even Patton's using his word structures in a more matured manner than Virgil is.
Virgil's talking like a teenager.
Probably because he is one.
Yes. I think I haven't accessed this on AO3 before. I haven't put kudos yet. Boop. Kudos! Sometimes labels fail. Chapter 3. It's the dad instinct, Logan. That's what you're feeling. Patton had said Shadowcaster wouldn't wake happy, and Logan had silently agreed, but he had been expecting a very different type of unhappy than what they were getting. Logan had anticipated fear, of course, but he'd imagined it would be the angry or even violent type of fear. It wasn't. It was something else. He was rather docile for someone who routinely committed crimes in a mask. He never looked like he might go on the offense. Logan imagined that he wouldn't, even if they did try to hurt him. He was always twitchy, shrinking away, and startling when they acted too quickly or too loudly. He watched their hands with careful eyes and had trouble making eye contact. He'd recoiled when Patton touched a butter knife. It was disturbing and made his hackles rise for reasons he couldn't quite name. Logan watched him closely throughout the day. Patton gave him a pair of loose pants and a hoodie to replace the bloody and torn outfit he'd come in with. It completely swamped his smaller frame. He liked to try to hide in it, pulling his hands in and tucking his chin under the neckline until he was just a dark gray blob. He had a tendency to curl around his wound protectively, as though scared it would be taken advantage of, despite the fact that Patton had stitched it up with his own hand. He looked so small like that. Yet, despite his fear, there was a softness to him too. He responded well to Patton, which, to be fair, it was Patton, but still. He'd gone so far as to chuckle at a few of Patton's ridiculous jokes, even if his eyes flickered to Logan, as though to make sure he wasn't in trouble for doing so. Patton lit up every time. He'd already been ready to befriend him before he'd woken up. Then he'd woken frightened and soft-spoken, and any caution Patton had with regards to him was quickly thrown away as his dad friend mode activated at hyperspeed. There was nothing for it now. Not that Logan was particularly worried. Shadowcaster had proven himself trustworthy before now, enough, at least, for Logan to bring him here, and just a few conversations with him had something stirring in Logan. He looked at Logan in a certain way, maybe not trustingly, but like he wanted to trust him. He smiled when Logan did something for him or offered him something. The curious way he'd looked at the soup floating in midair reminded him of his favorite students. The way he'd leaned forward and snatched a bit of liquid out of the air was something Patton insisted on doing on the regular, and left him with a fond feeling in his chest. He watched with that same burn of fondness as Shadowcaster peeked his face out of his hoodie bundle to watch Patton intently. The apply love and affection plot was fully in motion, and Logan thought it may actually work if given enough time. Patton had begun his story a few steps away from the bed. He was regaling him with a story about Remy, not using his name, of course, post-appendicitis. The man had managed to somehow bribe or blackmail 3 separate co-workers to smuggle him Starbucks coffee before he'd been cleared to eat by his doctor. Patton had been forced to repeatedly intervene as the coffee schemes got more and more complex and underhanded. While Patton had been speaking, he'd edged his way closer to Shadowcaster, like he was a startled stray animal and the story was a piece of ham. By now, he'd managed to sit on the edge of the bed without his target startling. His hand snuck out as Logan watched to softly touch him on the calf, his mouth never pausing. Shadowcaster definitely noticed, but he didn't seem alarmed, and he didn't draw away. He just glanced at the hand and back up, maybe a little suspicious, but far more confused than uncomfortable. Logan watched the interaction curiously. How did Patton do these things? It was like magic. I eventually brought him coffee myself once he was cleared by his doctor, but I don't think he has ever completely forgiven me. He hasn't, Logan commented, as quietly as possible to still be heard, not wanting to break whatever spell Patton had cast, and cause the man to launch himself directly onto the ceiling like a startled cat. Patton looked over to glare at him with a playful glint in his eyes. Do you two get together to talk about me? He asked. Only on Tuesdays, he replied. We exchange notes. Hang on, did he say Tuesdays and Thursdays were for research?
Yep.
Coffee with Remy is research.
I mean, hey, maybe he wants to learn more about Patton's actual fields and decided to get some more and decided to get another perspective, but it's not his husband.
Yeah. Let's see. Tuesdays and Thursdays for research and meetings. Okay, it could just be a meeting. But still.
But what would he need to meet with Remy for? Remy's a
Gossip.
nurse and Logan is a professor.
Gossip about Patton.
Probably.
Which, the fact that
Can you
they
blame them?
meeting regularly on Tuesdays is like Logan likes Remy more than he lets on.
I just love this so much. Oh my god.
Yay. Patton chuckled and patted the man's leg before withdrawing the touch completely and standing. Well, he said, I think it's about time for supper. Any requests? Traditional post-surgery food is ice cream. For tonsillitis, doctor, Logan chided, rolling his eyes. Patton didn't acknowledge him, just wiggled his eyebrows at the man on the bed, but he did not laugh as Patton had probably been aiming for. Instead, he had stilled. Dinner? He asked. Wait, how long have I been here? Around 18 hours. It's slightly past 6 p.m. now, Logan answered. Shadowcaster sucked in a panicked breath, eyes widening. He made to sit up completely, swinging his legs over the side of the bed, not seeming to notice the pain that he had to be in at the sudden movement. Patton took a startled step forward to block his way so he wouldn't stand. Logan noticed the shadows at the end of the room shudder a bit at his upset. Oh God, I missed school. Hey, I mean, my foster dad is going to kill me. Then
Oh
his
no,
mouth
honey, just stop talking. Oh god. Typical teenage panic.
Then his mouth clicked closed and his eyes widened as he realized that in tripping over himself to not reveal a name, he'd accidentally revealed other, perhaps more pertinent information about himself. Your what? Patton asked. He'd straightened like someone had pulled a string attached to the top of his head, poised and still like a dog on point. He turned suddenly intense eyes on Shadowcaster. How old are you? Shadowcaster shrunk back into the bed, eyes wide and more terrified than they'd been when he was bleeding from a gunshot wound. And oh, so many things made more sense now. The strange vulnerability instead of the expected angry defensiveness, the smaller frame and lighter weight, the different speech patterns, the childlike curiosity, the fact that he'd somehow ended up in the middle of a school shooting during the day, despite the fact that all of Shadowcaster's activities took place exclusively during the night before and after the incident. That's why you showed up at the school, Logan said. You attend the high school. Oh my God, Patton whispered. Oh my God, how old are you? The boy, the actual literal child, apparently, shook his head in response, and Logan didn't want to think about why he seemed to be more afraid of them hurting him now that they knew he was a child than he had been before. Tears were streaming down his face, and he was trembling in terror. Patton, of course, being an empathetic crier, started tearing up too. Oh no. Now they were both distraught. What was Logan supposed to do about this? Think logically. He threw a hand toward the bathroom door, and a roll of toilet paper flew into his waiting palm. He tossed it at the boy, and it smacked him in the head before falling into his lap. He seemed stunned into calm by the action. For the, Logan tapped his cheek. The boy blinked at him as he shifted from one foot to the other. Apologies, we don't stock tissues in this room. Patton was still sniffling softly. Oh, honey, you try so hard. You really do. I love you. Thank you. The boy was still staring at the toilet paper roll. He looked up at Logan, and then over at Patton, and then back to the toilet paper. Then he started to cry again. Well, that didn't work. Luckily, Patton seemed to know what to do from here. He sat next to him on the bed and plucked the toilet paper from his hands. He tore off a couple of sheets to wipe at his cheeks with a gentle hand, then hushed him and, in spite of Shadowcaster's clear fear toward them, managed to coax the boy forward so he was leaning his head against Patton's chest. "It's okay," Patton soothed. "You're okay. Hush now." He rubbed a couple of calming circles into his back and pressed his cheek against the top of his head. He side-eyed Logan meaningfully.
Mm.
Logan took a cautious step toward them, and Patton flashed him a hint of a smile. Okay, that is what Patton wanted from him. He took a couple more steps toward the bed and sat carefully on the bed next to them, opposite the boy from Patton. Patton raised an eyebrow at him, and he blinked back blandly. Patton gave a fond eye roll and grabbed one of his hands from where it was sitting on the bed, guiding it onto the back of Shadowcaster's head. Oh, okay. Logan could guess what he was supposed to do from here. When Patton released him, he gently ran his fingers through Shadowcaster's hair. Even though he trusted Patton to know best in situations such as this, he was still surprised that the touch caused the boy's shoulders to relax a bit. "We would like to know your age," Logan said firmly, but punctuated the demand with a soft scratch of fingernails to his scalp. "We aren't angry, and we won't cause you harm." He paused long enough that Logan didn't think he'd capitulate. "I'm 15," he answered finally. He saw Patton's lips turn down in displeasure. "You've been active in the cities for over a year," Logan said in surprise. "You've been robbing banks since you were 14?" He flinched away a bit, and Logan grimaced at his own tone and started the head scratching again in hopes that it would pacify him. It seemed to work. 13, actually," he mumbled. 13, Patton mouthed. "Why?" Logan asked. A 13-year-old robbing a bank was more than strange, especially without outside influence, and Shadowcaster had always worked alone. What could possibly prompt such behavior? "I needed money," he answered simply. "You were 13. Why would you need money? To buy coloring books?" "Bluebird," Patton scolded. Shadowcaster shrugged. "Food and clothes, mostly. Life's kind of expensive, and I couldn't exactly get a real job, even if I thought I'd be allowed to." "Food and clothes," Patton said blankly. "Yes," he replied, as though he were the one confused about their behavior. Patton looked distressed, not that Logan was faring much better. "That is not something a 13-year-old, or a 15-year-old for that matter, should be worrying about. Certainly not to the degree where they feel compelled to rob banks," Logan said. "Yeah, maybe," Shadowcaster replied non-committally. "Yeah, definitely," Patton corrected, and moved back to search his face. Did did your foster father do that to you?" he asked. Oh, that hadn't even occurred to Logan. The way the boy's fingers gripped the sheet tighter next to his leg was all the answer the adults needed. "You aren't going back there," Patton concluded. "What?" he asked. "You aren't going back. I'll kidnap you. Would you want me to kidnap you?"
Patton! Oh my god.
He looked at Logan for help. Logan shrugged. He certainly had no moral qualms with the idea, though he figured there were probably less extreme methods they could take before getting to that point. He'd talk Patton down privately later. Well, maybe. "You," the boy continued. The yes was clear in his eyes, even to Logan as he hesitated, fingers curling and uncurling in his lap. And wasn't that horrible? One meal and a couple of hugs from Patton could convince him that he'd be better off with them than in his current living situation. "You could get in a lot of trouble for that," he finished. "I don't care," Patton said instantly. Logan knew him enough to know he was telling the truth, and that's not an answer. He hesitated again, but then slowly shook his head. "No, I couldn't. I'm a minor. You'd get in so much trouble, and I have to go to school. People would notice if I just disappeared from school and they'd call the cops. You can't just. No. Fine, Patton agreed. We'll figure something else out then. But you are never going back there, he promised. Shadowcaster did not look completely convinced, but he nodded. Patton moved to pull him into a hug, and he went willingly. Patton looked at Logan over the boy's head, a certain glint to his eyes that Logan understood instantly. It was a rare sight, but one that Logan was intimately familiar with. He remembered with clarity the day it was set on him. He hadn't known what it meant at the time. He just knew he'd suddenly been unable to breathe. Now he knew what the look was. He'd seen it leveled at different things through the years. The kitchen in this house, the god-awful rug in the living room, the dog, the caffeine-addicted nurse. It's mine now, the look said. I love it, and it's mine. And once Patton decided that, there was no fighting on him, not even when it had been Logan himself. It was a good thing the kid was an orphan, because Logan guessed he was a dad now.
Oh my god, I'm going to fucking die. This fic is going to kill me.
With cuteness?
Yes. Very much yes, but also just, I'm going to kidnap you. Superhero in the room. I'm okay with that.
Yes. I am okay with kidnapping this child. Let's do it.
I don't think it's so much let's do it, it's that
I will permit you to do it.
it's like, I give you permission.
I am aware that I'm not going to be able to stop you. But
You
also,
can't
like,
lead them, join them.
yeah, he's like, I have no moral qualms about kidnapping this child. He literally said that. Not out loud, but he did.
Think it.
He, no moral qualms with kidnapping this child.
Surprise adoption.
Yes. Hey.
Sometimes labels fail. Chapter 4. No. Virgil comes to the conclusion that he's willing to die for any living being in this house. So basically, they found him again. Virgil had absolutely no idea what was happening, honestly. The last 48 hours had been a wild as fuck ride. At 8 a.m. 2 days ago, he'd been already half asleep in Earth Science class watching some movie about igneous rocks. Is that what it is?
Mm-hmm.
Since then, he'd failed another English quiz, gotten shot, gotten operated on by Bluebird's boyfriend, husband, slept in Bluebird's house, and had been told that he wasn't going to go back to Harry even if the doctor and Bluebird had to kidnap him to make it so. The conviction with which the doctor had made that proclamation had left Virgil speechless. He wasn't quite sure if he was ready to believe he really wasn't going to have to go back. But God did he hope he didn't. And for no other reason that he didn't want to face whatever punishment he'd get for not only missing school, but also not going home for 2 nights in a row. Last night, they'd fed him dinner of spaghetti and roasted vegetables, and the doctor had brought him strawberry ice cream despite Bluebird's protests. You're a doctor! Exactly! I know more about health than you do! Cue irate sputtering.
They're adorable.
They are. After dinner, the doctor had helped him walk up and down the hallway a few times. He was really sore, but he could get around okay enough, which seemed to make the doctor happy. After that, they let him go alone for a bit, only to come back to check on him a couple of times before going to bed. He totally could have made an escape attempt. Of course, they did say he wasn't a prisoner, but still, they'd even let him sleep by himself despite knowing he was partially mobile. Virgil had let curiosity get the better of him a little past midnight and snuck out of the room to see if this was all for real. A glance into the room a few doors down let him know that they did actually fall asleep with him unrestrained in the house. He could have even taken a look at their faces if he was a jerk and brave enough to risk their ire, which he certainly was not. He made it down the stairs unhindered and found himself in a really, truly normal house. He'd found a dog, jumped on top of the chair in surprise when it yipped at him, and then pet the dog for about 20 minutes or so. Honestly, mood.
Mhm.
Then, unsure what else to do, he got himself a glass of water, making sure to clean, dry, and replace the cup, and went back to bed. Now, he'd just been woken by a knock on the door. Can I come in? The doctor's voice asked. It's your house, Virgil pointed out. Is that a yes? Yes. He opened the door and gave him a smile. Can I rebandage your wound? Virgil nodded, and he went off to wash his hands in the bathroom before changing the bandages. It looks good, he said, and Virgil had to take his word for it, because it looked pretty shitty to him, red and kind of swollen around the stitches. Then he handed him a change of clothes he'd brought and left to wait for him in the hallway while he changed. Once Virgil was finished, he led him down to the kitchen with a promise of breakfast. The dog trotted over expectantly, and Virgil carefully went down on his knees so he could pet it without pulling on his stitches. That's Missy, the doctor informed him. Missy yapped at him and hopped a couple of times to try to lick his face. Hello, Missy, Virgil said seriously. I would die for you. He jumped a bit when a hand ruffled his hair, but it was gone after a moment as the doctor walked over to where Bluebird was cooking. His hand got smacked with a rubber spatula as he reached toward his bacon. Oh my god. Yes, I love them so much. His hand got smacked with a rubber spatula as he reached toward a plate of bacon, but it didn't deter him as he snatched a piece away. That's for the omelets, Bluebird scolded as the doctor danced away. He tore the strip of bacon in half and offered one piece to Virgil. Virgil took it surprised and had to push Missy away as she lunged, quickly stuffing it into his mouth. Thanks, he said once he swallowed. He gave the disappointed pup another pat, which seemed to placate her, before carefully maneuvering his feet back under him and slowly standing back up. The doctor had moved to grab cups from a cabinet. What do you want to drink? He asked. Pineapple juice? Milk? Water? Tea? He would have said water, but Bluebird mumbled, Please consume the godforsaken juice, under his breath. The doctor reached over to smack him on the arm. What's wrong with the juice? Virgil asked. Nothing, the doctor told him. There's just a sale at Costco. Who needs a dozen glasses of pineapple juice? Bluebird asked. The doctor frowned at him. It was a good deal. I'll take the juice, Virgil said. Please. Just like, please, if it gets you guys to shut up. The doctor smiled at him and poured them each a glass of juice. Bluebird apparently didn't get a choice about the pineapple juice. And set them around the table while Bluebird flipped the omelet. The doctor then ushered Virgil towards one of the seats at the table. Virgil sat obediently and watched the man go back to the counter to grab a plate stacked high with toast. I can help if you want, he offered. Oh, absolutely not, the doctor jerked. Virgil fidgeted in his seat as butter, peanut butter, and 2 types of jam were set on the table along with silverware. Bluebird finished the omelet in the meantime and flipped it onto a plate. He set it down in front of Virgil before going back to the stove to work on another one. Virgil blinked down at the omelet. It wasn't quite restaurant standard, but it leaked a little bit of cheese out of the sides, and it was just slightly browned. It looked fantastic. Go ahead, the doctor said when he didn't move to eat it. No need to let it get cold. Virgil slowly reached for the fork, cut himself a piece of omelet, and put it in his mouth. The doctor really didn't seem angry that he was eating, so he allowed himself to enjoy the bite and take another. The doctor leaned forward, and Virgil tensed, but he just grabbed a piece of toast and tossed it onto Virgil's plate. Wow, Virgil would die for any living thing in this room. This is really good, Virgil said. It's one of the few things I can cook well. I sustained myself almost purely on egg dishes throughout my late teens and early 20s. Mood. He turned around. He looked at the doctor. Am I supposed to know what that means? You're in your 50s, so you're probably okay, the doctor answered. Do you know what it means? Virgil asked, for the most part. Oh, okay. I was just like, okay, so Patton and I was thinking they were like in their late 30s. Holy shit, 50s?
They're 50s.
Oh.
They're adults. They're adulty adults.
They are adulty adults.
They're so good at adultery.
They're good at adulting.
You're good at adulting.
I just realized I could have said adultery.
I did say adultery.
Oh, I didn't even hear you say that.
I said they're so good at adultery.
I didn't hear that.
I
I
thought
was
you
like,
were
why are you
correcting
laughing
me.
so hard? Oh. Hindsight's 2020, unlike my actual sight. All right. Bluebird finished the second omelet a few minutes later and handed the plate to the doctor before turning back to cook his own. The doctor went about putting jam on his toast, and Virgil's hand itched to shove a piece of toast into his pocket for later. While the doctor was distracted and Bluebird had his back turned, it would be so easy. They'd been too nice to him for him to steal from them. Plus, he didn't know if they'd be asking for these clothes back soon, and he didn't want to have to deal with the consequences if they found him out. Instead, he drank a sip of juice. It was actually really good. He didn't know what Bluebird was complaining about, and worked on finishing his omelet while watching the other occupants of the room. As he pranced over to the doctor and pawed at his leg, he glanced over at Bluebird and quickly ripped off a piece of his omelet and fed it to the dog. Stop that! Bluebird whipped around, wielding the spatula-like weapon. Stop feeding that thing from the table! It was, of course, far too late. The bite of omelet was already halfway to the dog's stomach. She deserves it, the doctor argued. She's a baby. She's a dog. He transferred the last omelet to his own plate and turned off the stove before walking over to the table. He bumped into the doctor's chair on his way by. The doctor tore off a little bit of toast and threw it on his back. Missy lunged to gobble up the fallen toast. Virgil sipped at his juice while watching them eat with interest. They were flirting, he thought, but like in a domestic way instead of the way people did at school. He wondered if they were dating or married, or what, but it wasn't nearly bold enough to ask. Despite his complaints, Bluebird drank the juice without comment and let the dog lay on his feet while he ate. So, the doctor said when they'd finished, we have a plan. Is it a legal plan? Virgil questioned. It is, Bluebird assured, a hint of amusement coloring his tone. Okay, Virgil responded. I'm listening then. You will likely be uncomfortable with parts of the plan, Bluebird informed him. But hear us out because we promise we'll be careful about everything. That sounded suspicious. Okay. The general idea is we have the medical professional document your scars and turn them over to the police, thereby triggering a criminal investigation and intervention from social services. And do you think that would work? Virgil asked, trying not to sound quite as dubious as he was. This wasn't a plan. This was expecting the system to do its job, which it had already proven itself incapable of doing. Maybe they should just throw a penny in the toilet and make a wish while they flushed it. When faced with evidence and your testimony, the appropriate authorities will have no choice but to take action, Bluebird replied, confident. Tell that to my freshman English teacher, Virgil grumbled. A hand reached over the table to cover his. If it doesn't work, the doctor said, we'll just kidnap you and come up with another plan, but you aren't going back there, over my dead body. Which would only happen over my dead body, Bluebird said dryly. Love you too, the doctor said without looking away from Virgil. Damn, they were actually serious. It won't come to that, Bluebird said, the kidnapping or the death. No, it won't, the doctor agreed. There's a specific nurse we plan to contact about the photos. His name is Remy. He's really nice and will make sure the police get the right information. He's already proven himself willing to be discreet. We will transfer you into his care so there's a level of protection as to your actions as Shadowcaster from the police. Of course, the doctor interjected. That would mean you're going to have to take off the mask before we meet up with him, kiddo, and to the two of us, your secret identity is going to be shot. Yes, Bluebird agreed and then paused. Wait, he turned to the doctor. Please tell me this wasn't a pun. This is not an appropriate joke to make in this situation. The man in question sipped at his pineapple juice innocently. Doctor! Virgil coughed out a laugh. Bluebird sighed. As I was saying, Remy and... God damn it. Patton, why? I was trying so hard.
No, I want to see you laugh when things are funny.
I was like, okay, I see where this is going. Keep it together. Keep it together. God damn it. Okay. I was just like, I was trying so hard, just like, you can do this, you can do this, you made it past, and it caught up with you. Good job. Bluebird sighed. As I was saying, Remy will turn you and the photos over to the police. From there, everything should take care of itself. I'll make sure it takes care of itself, the doctor said, voice steely. Virgil wondered exactly who this man was under the mask. What influence did he have that he thought he'd be able to do something as miraculous as make the system do its job? This really isn't just some convoluted trick to get me to reveal my identity so you can arrest me, is it? Virgil asked. Of course not, Bluebird said. As you said earlier, we could have just taken off your mask and done a few Google searches. Right, Virgil said. He drank the last of his juice and set the mug on the table. Yeah, okay. Despite the fact that it felt rather silly, his hand still shook as he reached up to take the mask off his face. My name is Virgil. I am going to die, and I am going to die for this child. Oh my god.
Sweetheart.
Yes, he is. Oh, and I tried to like slow it down because the second I saw that line, my first immediate like, my name is Virgil. Like when he's just trying to rip it off like that name, like no, you got to slow this one down.
Yes. Hey. Ready?
Continue.
Sometimes labels fail. Chapter 5. Remy spoke like 5 lines in this entire story, and he managed to steal my entire heart. Same.
I swear to God, every single time, it's just like Remy. And the first thing I associate with him is, girl, do I not have enough eyes for you? Because I'm just like, that level of sass, that would be him. And I love it so much.
Be prepared for more sass, man.
Yes! I love the sassy man.
Yes, he is. He is fabulous.
Sassy man, best man.
Yes. The boy, Virgil, shivered on the rooftop despite the old coat of patents that they'd wrapped him up in. And Logan did mean wrapped. He looked like a toddler in it because of its size. How did Logan ever think he was an adult? He was tiny. Too small, in fact, for 15. He fidgeted nervously as they waited, eyes casing the area as though, despite their reassurances and the irrationality of the thought, he still thought this was going to be some cruel trick that would end in pain. Shadows shifted near his feet, barely noticeable unless you knew to look. One curled up around his ankle. A self-comfort habit? Hey, you seem cold, kiddo. Here, Patton said, opening his arms. Virgil eyed him for a moment before shifting forward to let Patton hug him. He was oddly trusting for someone with his history, if you could call it a history with how recent it was. He was 15, and only just with the vulnerability of childhood not quite burned away. It was enough for Patton to wiggle his way through his defenses, as Patton was known to do. He also seemed comfortable around Logan, which was a strange experience, as people usually shied away from him in the beginning. He often terrified his students for at least the first month of classes, and he had a resting "I'll cut you, bitch" face, according to Remy.
Yes! Just that I'll shank a bitch.
Patton had been a rare and noticeable exception to that rule, though to be fair, he'd been operating on a rather severe sleep deficit upon their first meeting. We should read their first meeting at a point.
Yes.
It's very cute. Coffee shop meet cute. Of course, it was not as though he and Virgil were only just meeting for the first time today, even if he'd only learned his name less than 3 hours ago, and the boy still did not know his own. They had managed to build a certain level of rapport over the last year. Logan had been around at what was likely some of his most vulnerable moments, beginning with the horror in his school, and ending with him bleeding on the pavement. He'd formed some sort of attachment bond to Logan, or as Logan put it when they'd had a moment alone this morning, You're the closest thing to a safe adult he's had in the past year. Just give him affection. Please stop panicking about this." With the mental reminder, Logan reached over to give him a soft pat on the head, and the shivers, already lessened in Patton's arms, stopped altogether. Shadows shifted and twined around Logan's ankles with not quite solid pressure, like a steady stream of cool air curling around him. Fascinating. Logan could not help but feel fondness curl in his chest when Patton smiled at him, wrapped around the child. He hadn't bothered to even try to argue when Patton had informed him that they'd be keeping the kid. After some legal hoop jumping, of course. He had figured, after all. Logan didn't have any objections anyway, though he predicted he'd be a complete nightmare eventually, when he finally felt safer enough around him. Logan knew enough to anticipate behavioral issues in the future, testing boundaries, or simply not having a frame of reference for appropriate behavior. It would be a headache, surely, but Logan did not think he'd find it in himself to regret it. "Sup, girls? Want to tell me why you summoned me this rooftop at ass crack o'clock in the morning?" a voice asked.
Yes! While you were reading it, I could hear Remy saying it. I'm just like, oh my fucking god.
It's proof to the author's goodness at writing Remy, because I did not do a very good Remy voice.
I'm just like, I can fucking hear him say that. Tone of voice and all.
Yay.
Although, ass crack o'clock in the morning is now my new definition for 4 a.m.
I do like that phrase. Well,
Normally
I
it's
think
the
that
ass
that's the
crack of
first.
dawn, but
Yeah, I've heard ass crack of dawn before. I haven't heard this particular one. Ass crack o'clock in the morning. It's 10:30 a.m., Logan pointed out, turning toward the man who'd just come through the rooftop door. He noticed Virgil pull away from Patton quickly. "Yeah, and I worked a shift until 7 a.m., Remy grumbled, taking a sip from his coffee cup.
oh yeah, dude, you need that to live.
He's.
Just like me with monsters.
Thanks for coming, Remy. I know you're probably very tired," Patton said. Remy waved his hand through the air dismissively. Yeah, just add it to your coffee tab. Or create a coffee tab, since I don't know who you are, stranger behind the mask.
Oh, Remy, I love you.
Logan rolled his eyes. "You know why you're here?" Yeah, we Gucci." God, Remy was even more intolerable when tired, which was basically all the time. Yet, Logan beckoned Virgil over to himself. He took a cautious step forward, and Logan put a hand on his shoulder. "This is Virgil," Logan said. "Virgil, this is Remy. He's a nurse." "Hi," Virgil said softly. There was a moment's pause where Remy shifted gears. Remy was annoying at best most of the time, but he was a good man and perceptive. Annoyingly perceptive often, but he'd proven himself many times over. "Hey, baby," Remy said, "guessing you're my newest patient." "Yeah," he replied, curling his shoulders up and looking away. "No need to be nervous, kid. I'll buy you a coffee on the way. I need one anyway, and we'll have a nice chat about whatever kids like these days. Like what? The Ninja Tortoises?"
How old is Remy in this case if the others are like in their 50s?
I don't know.
I want to peg him like maybe 30s, late 30s maybe, but that's what I wanted to peg Logan and Patton as. So I honestly have no clue.
I don't know. Virgil gave him a look, suddenly too taken over by the "oh god, this old person doesn't know what he's talking about" distress to be any other kind of distressed. "Yeah," Remy said, "didn't think that was it. You'll have to update me on what kids are into now while we go to the hospital. Then we'll have our fun, quick little photo shoot, and I'll even give you a sucker at the end."
Oh god, Remy, you better give him a entire candy.
Yes.
I wanted to say candy store, but I'm just like, Virgil hopped up on that much sugar.
It's probably not great. Yeah. Virgil bit his lip, and Patton reached over to rub his back. It's all right, kiddo. Remy's good. Annoying, Logan couldn't help but contribute, but good. Yeah, Mr. Stick in the Mud, Remy said. Virgil smiled a bit, the traitor, and Remy winked at him and offered a hand. Come on, babe. Patton gave him a light push, and he walked forward to Remy. Remy put a careful arm around his shoulder. He has a fresh gunshot wound to his abdomen, Logan said. I expect it won't make it into the photos. A gunshot wound, huh? Remy said, eyes locking with Logan's for a brief moment before scanning his new charge up and down with perceptive eyes. I see. Then he shot Logan an annoying half smile. Don't worry, babes. I stitch, I don't snitch. Remy, Logan said firmly. Remy's face smoothed out. I know you don't know me, he said. It isn't like we have Tuesday coffee dates at least twice a month or anything, but you know you can trust me.
That's Sam.
Yes. Logan pursed his lips, but nodded. All right, kid, time to go. The coffee in the hospital is not the best, but they have this thing called the Remy Special I'm going to get you. It's 3 pumps of dark chocolate, 2 of white chocolate, and 5 of caramel. 6 espresso shots blended with ice and topped with double whipped cream and milk chocolate sauce. You won't need to sleep for days.
Is it sad that I kind of want to try that?
Fair. Don't you dare give him that, Patton warned, his voice dark enough to make even Logan shudder. Or what? Remy asked, unconcerned. It's not like you're my boss. Patton gave him a very unimpressed look, and Virgil giggled a bit, despite not knowing what the joke was. Remy gave him a soft smile and hugged him toward the door. Time to go, baby. Virgil looked back at them briefly. Thanks, he said quietly, before he let himself be led into the stairwell. Logan turned to Patton with an intentionally blank expression. This is the first and last time we are letting Remy babysit.
Oh, you're embracing the parent role already, Logan.
Yes.
Sometimes labels fail. Chapter 6. Let the child sleep. For the next 3 days, Virgil was a human hot potato. He was relentlessly tossed back and forth between a gaggle of cops, attorneys, and social workers. He wasn't sure what strings Bluebird and the doctor had tugged on, but they were certainly effective because not only was he being taken out of that house, but criminal charges were being thrown at Harry like they were eggs, and he was the local high school's principal's car on Halloween. Like, shit, is this how the system was supposed to work? Oh gosh, I love this. I love the mental image this just gave me.
Yeah, that's
He was
pretty
grateful.
cool.
He was grateful for everything all these people were doing, even as he chafed under the pointed attention he was receiving. But he was utterly exhausted by this point, and sore from the bullet wound none of them knew about, and he really wanted to collapse into a bed, any bed. Instead, he had to settle on leaning his head on the table in front of him and taking long, slow blinks that may or may not have constituted mini power naps. Virgil, a voice said, and he just about jumped out of his chair. He looked up at a social worker, Bev, he was pretty sure. Logan Sanders is here. Virgil squinted at her. Your temporary foster father, she prompted, inclining her head slightly at the man next to her. Oh, right. That had been the conversation they'd had. Emergency fostering while the investigation was taking place. 2 guys, something about a university being nearby. He'd zoned out pretty hard. He hopped to his feet in a panic, because no one wanted to deal with a kid who was too lazy to even peel his butt off a chair to greet them, even if they'd only had to deal with them temporarily. Hello, sir. It's nice to meet you. Likewise, he responded, his lips turning up in the corners enough to soften the harshness of his face. And Logan will suffice. He offered a hand, and Virgil shook it. After a brief conversation between Logan and the social worker that Virgil mostly tuned out, he was ushered over to the man's custody and led to a parking garage. He was ushered into the front seat of a nice, but not too flashy car. "I'll buy us lunch on the way," he told Virgil once he'd started the car. "Any preferences?" "No, thank you," Virgil replied. "You don't have to." "Well, I'm going to," he said. "Anything is fine." "All right." He pulled out of the parking garage and they drove for a bit more than 5 minutes before they pulled into a small parking lot of some place called the Hideout. They have the drive-through. "But would you mind going inside so you can see the menu?" he asked. "Sure." Despite feeling like he could collapse from exhaustion at any second while they walked into the cafe, he was glad he agreed because the place smelt amazing, like roasted coffee and really good bread. Something about the place made him want to relax even though there were people around. Maybe the soft lights or the elevator music in the background. Maybe it was just that none of the people there even glanced at them when they walked in, just kept their heads stuck in laptops, books, or notebooks, like there was an underwritten rule to mind their own business in the building. The man at the till looked at them when they approached. "Hello, Professor," he greeted. Virgil paused. Oh, that's where the social security worker had been talking with the university. Oh God, if he was a professor, he wasn't going to be happy with Virgil's D average, was he? Virgil's shoulders curled in. He wasn't looking forward to that conversation. And whatever Virgil would like. Logan had finished ordering while Virgil was lost in thought. He hadn't even glanced at the menu yet. Do you have any suggestions?" he asked Logan. He hummed, thankfully, not seeming angry that Virgil couldn't perform the basic task of ordering off a menu. "Do you prefer turkey or roast beef?" he asked. "Turkey," Virgil replied. Logan turned back to the cashier. "Then make that two of the turkey," he said. The cashier's eyes were bobbing curiously between Logan and Virgil, but he didn't ask any questions. Virgil shrunk into his hoodie anyway. "Would you like some coffee or tea?" Logan asked him. "I would kill a man for a cup of coffee," slipped out before Virgil could stop it. "Damn, Virgil, you had one coffee date with Remy." Logan chuckled at him. "All right," he said. "How do you take it?" And if he was going to give him positive reinforcements for being a little shit, as black as my soul. "I see," he said, turning back to the cashier. "You heard him. One glass." I can't read this with a straight face. "You heard him. One glass of milk." "Hey!" The cashier bit his lip, and Logan flashed a half smile. "I really do drink black coffee," Virgil mumbled. "Then two black coffees, cancel the milk." "Logan, you little shit." Although Patton probably would have done the same thing.
Uh-huh.
The cashier told them the total, and gee, that was a lot of money for someone to pay for lunch for him. But Logan didn't even blink as he handed over 20 and a 5. "You get chips with the sandwich," Logan told him and spun a dolly with chips to grab a bag of salt and vinegar ones. Virgil grabbed a bag of plain ones and then followed him to a nice secluded corner. "Pat and I come here often," Logan explained, setting out the little number so someone could find them with their food. Virgil figured he had probably been told who Patton was one of the times he'd been asleep when his eyes opened the past couple of days. His husband? Virgil wondered. He had a ring on, and he knew he was staying with two men, so it was likely. "It's within walking distance of the hospital and the campus, but it's far enough away from the university that I don't get interrupted by students who see me and want to ask me questions that are already answered on the syllabus." "Do you enjoy being a professor?" he asked. "I do. It's quite a rewarding career path between getting to teach and being able to research." "You do research?" "Yes. I'm working on using stochastic differential equations to model certain physical phenomena at the moment." "That sounds," he paused, "hard." "It can be. I always liked math and science, but I'm not really good at it." He said. "As someone who was taught for many years, I found that an inability to perform to standard in such subjects often has more to do with circumstance, past teachers, higher priority responsibilities, and home life." His eyes lingered on him for a moment too long, and Virgil squirmed. Of course, he had to know something about the situation considering the ongoing investigation thing, but Virgil did wonder how much. "Then with innate ability," he finished. "Yeah, maybe," Virgil said, even while he didn't truly agree. Virgil was pretty stupid. "Perhaps I can help you. What classes are you taking?" remedial everything. For math and science, pre-algebra and earth science. I'm also in freshman English and band. That's it. Ah, yes, the high school does the block schedule, Logan said. Then he gave a curious head tilt. I thought you were a sophomore. Virgil looked away. Uh, yeah. He could feel his cheeks start to burn. I see. There was a pause as Logan processed just how stupid Virgil was. And what instrument do you play? Virgil breathed a sigh of relief. At least there was something he wasn't a complete failure at. Clarinet. I'm a flute, babe. Reed instruments, my age-old foe. He said it so seriously that Virgil couldn't help but snort. Last a few battles with them. Have you ever attempted to play the oboe? He spat the name like it was a curse. I have, in fact, Virgil laughed, and Logan smiled at him in an oddly warm way. An employee came over with their food then. They continued talking while they ate, though Logan talked a lot more since Virgil was preoccupied with shoveling the sandwich down his throat. Almost definitely looking like a rabid animal. It was a really good sandwich. He slipped the bag of chips into his hoodie pocket for later and drank the coffee while Logan went about actually chewing his food. The caffeine helped a bit, but he certainly didn't feel completely awake when they walked back to the car. Logan didn't seem to mind when Virgil just set his head against the window and mentally drifted during the car ride. Eventually, they pulled into a driveway and Virgil sat up to blink at the house at the end of it. Then he blinked again. Did I, he said slowly, just get legally kidnapped? Ah, Logan said. That would be an astute observation. Huh. Is that all right? He asked. Virgil turned to see him watching him carefully. Patton can be rather, exuberant. I mean, this might as well happen. He was far too tired to deal with figuring out how he felt about this. He remembered he'd really, really wanted it for a moment before he quashed those feelings after the doctor, Patton, he presumed, had first suggested it. He didn't know how he felt about it now that it was actually happening and didn't have the energy to deal with it. I can take you back, Logan offered quietly, and an uncomfortable, squirmy feeling in his chest cut through the dullness for a moment at the thought. At any point, if you're uncomfortable with the arrangement. I'm fine, he said quickly. This is, like, a lot, and I'm really tired, but it's fine, I think. Okay, Logan said. Can I please sleep for a bit, though? He asked. Logan's eyes softened. Of course. Patton prepared your room for you in the last few days. We'll get a few other things for it later. I would take a sleeping bag in the basement at this point. Logan briefly pressed his hand to Virgil's shoulder before he got out of the car. Wow, Virgil thought, his shoulder still warm to the touch. There was, of course, no assurance that this would actually be an ultimately good thing, he reminded himself, but wow. I am just going to die of absolute cute. I love the fact that pull up to the house. Wait a second.
I recognize this house.
Like, I just got legally kidnapped. Kidnapping is just handed you to them, though.
He consented.
Although I'm sure Patton's is just waiting for them to come out of the car, just like dancing at the door like Missy, just like, yeah, they're here.
That's very cute. Probably accurate. So that's the end of those 6 chapters.
There better be more.
Oh, there's
besides the side stories, there better be more.
Oh, there's a lot more.
Yes.
There's so much more that I have not read it all yet. I have read a lot of pieces of it, but I have not read the whole thing yet.
I fucking loved Remy's sass.
Yeah, I love that nurse so much. One of the other pieces of this in this universe is Remy and Virgil's coffee date.
Yes.
So,
Although I am hoping that that once like he saw the house, he's just like, oh, so maybe like that, because like now he knows what Logan's identity is and what Patton's identity is. So he's like,
yes.
oh, so that's what that nurse was talking about.
I don't think he connected those dots. No.
Yeah, probably not, but it would be a really cool thought considering the fact that Patton's a doctor, Remy's a nurse. Chances are they work in the same hospital. They might know each other.
Hmm. Well, he does get to meet Patton's coworkers before too long, so he gets to hang out with Remy more.
Yes,
Fabulous.
there's no better combination for chaos than anxiety and sleep.
I love them. They are so good. Remy is the best chaos uncle.
Yes, he is. He's just that chill ass uncle in the corner, just like, what the hell's going on here? Oh, this, and you didn't do anything. I was supposed to. But yes, Remy, chaos enabler.
Thank you for listening to us read Sometimes Labels Fail. We had a lot of fun, and we're going to keep reading more of this. So tune in next time for more of this awesome series.
Woo!
Bye.
Bye.